The biggest problem entrepreneurs and people worldwide have is thinking that the problem of our climate is someone else's problem. Okay, it's not your problem. And also, the biggest problem today is that you are always thinking about climate in terms of either purpose or prosperity, not both. And Lincoln Bleveans today is here to tell us that we can think otherwise about the climate problem. We can think of it as a solution for purpose and prosperity. Now, Lincoln Bleveans is an executive and thought leader in the global energy industry, and he's done this for 30 years. And he currently leads Stanford University's Mission Essential Operations and world-leading applied innovation in sustainability, adaptation, resilience, climate justice, utilities, and infrastructure. I am so honored to have you here, Lincoln. And please tell us, what's the secret to your success? And is it at all related to climate, purpose, and prosperity?
Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu, mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
Well, it's definitely connected to all three. I think, when I started out, I was not quite sure what 30 plus years ago, I was not quite sure where my career would go. And I discovered energy quite accidentally and fell in love with it. And over time, the energy industry, of course, has become greener and greener as we move from coal and natural gas in particular to renewable energy. And what I found is, as I've gone through my career and pivoted and pivoted and pivoted and pivoted and walked through open doors, even though it was very dark on the other side of the door and uncertain, that the best way to get things done in the world and to move the world forward is to satisfy both the purpose element, which is very, very important to me in my career, but also the prosperity element. I find that if we try to split those two apart, we either get, if it's just about purpose, it gets underfunded. And if it's just about prosperity, it probably doesn't get done the way it needs to get done or as effectively as it could get done. So for me, it's been a constant process of adjustment and walking through doors. I like to say that, I graduated from university in 1989, and none of the jobs that I've held since then really existed in 1989. And what I found, of course, is that now the rate of change in the world is so much faster. And so it's a question of pivoting faster and walking through doors that, again, you're not quite sure where they lead, but they look inviting. And so you try to make that happen and just try to keep learning every second of the way.
Thank you. Tell us about your mission regarding climate.
Well, for me, I'm very conscious of a couple of things. One is that my generation, and I'm 57 years old now, born in the late 60s, is really the last generation to be unconsciously responsible for climate change. And I use that, of course, we were conscious of it, but not conscious in all capital letters, so to speak. That said, we are also the first generation, I believe, to be conscious of the solutions that we can bring. And now, having had a lot of experience, a lot of been there and done that experience, my mission is to help not just the innovators, but the application of innovation, making innovation real and helping along a lot of the younger people in particular who are the innovators and the entrepreneurs, but also are going to inherit or already inheriting this world that we've created. It's not a great inheritance, but they have the opportunity really to save the day and change the trajectory of where the climate is going and therefore where our human habitat is going.
Thank you. Now, every time I think about climate and, recycling, and every time I think about that, I can never kind of incorporate prosperity into it. At least I'm not aware of how you can potentially incorporate prosperity into that. What I'm thinking about is expense. It's hard, but of course it's worth it. I love recycling, actually. But I'm never thinking about prosperity when I'm thinking about climate. So tell us how climate plus purpose plus prosperity actually can work.
Well, I think you can look at it at everything from the individual human being level all the way up to the corporate and sovereign nation sort of level, the world level. At the individual level, there are so many jobs. There are so many great, really interesting, really impactful, and really well-paying jobs that are coming out of this climate revolution, this climate transformation that our world is going into. Whether it is a white-collar job like finance, I'll give you an example. We spent over $1 trillion as a world just last year on green energy infrastructure, over $1 trillion. And that's anticipated to be almost $10 trillion a year by 2030. So an enormous amount of need for finance professionals, for accounting professionals, for legal professionals. And as that money gets implemented, you're looking at engineering and construction and operations and maintenance. You're looking at whole ecosystems, economic ecosystems that develop around, for example, a big solar project or a big wind project. So all the way through the chain, from the furthest white collar to the furthest blue collar and everything in between, we're seeing a tremendous amount of job creation, and more than that, opportunity creation. And that's whether you are an innovator, like a scientist or an engineer, an entrepreneur, for example, trying to get a new product or service into the marketplace, an advocate trying to move government policy forward, all sorts of new opportunities for that. And finally, or an educator, someone who is bringing the new reality of the world and helping people understand it. So I see it at the micro level, a tremendous amount of opportunity for individual human beings, no matter who, what, or where you are. But then on the other side of the equation, what we're finding with green energy in particular is that it is less expensive to operate significantly less expensive to operate than traditional infrastructure. For example, we don't have a cost of natural gas or a cost of coal with a solar plant or a wind plant. Now, that gets a little bit complicated when we try to do that on a very large scale and keep the lights on. But again, that's a competitive advantage, whether you're a company or a country, in attracting new investment, attracting the best workforce. There are a lot of ways that this plays out, in other words, in both purpose and prosperity.
Thank you. How can regular entrepreneurs contribute and at the same time benefit from helping the climate?
Well, I think when you look at this, and I tend to think in infrastructure terms because that's my background, but I think I know it applies even down to the level of, I'm looking around the room here, a smart thermostat that might be in a house or in an office building. I think the first key to success as a climate tech entrepreneur is understanding that the innovation economy has been built around digital innovation. And it's been very, very successful. Google, Facebook, Cisco, Oracle, all of these things, very much about leveraging digital innovation into great companies, great profitable companies. Climate tech is different because it's underpinned not by the digital world, which of course has a very low incremental cost of expansion. It's underpinned by steel and concrete in terms of very large, very long-lived infrastructure projects. It's underpinned by billion and trillion dollar subsidy packages like the Inflation Reduction Act in the US and similar acts around the, similar legislation around the world. It's underpinned by public finance as much as it is by private finance. And in either case, you're not talking about millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars to get a first prototype to market. You're talking about often hundreds of millions of dollars, which is a completely different risk profile. But then finally, everything I'm seeing in the climate world is not just about the device. It's not just about technology, but it's also about human behavior. And I'll give you a quick example. We recently bought a house when we moved up here to the Bay Area of California that has Nest thermostats in it. And I'm the energy geek in the family, and I was all excited about this. I thought we were going to save money, we're going to be more comfortable, we're going to save the environment, we're going to save the climate, all these great things. The other members of my family, however, look at it and they see a thermostat. And so they're turning it on, they're turning it off, they're setting it too high to get warm and then dialing it way back because they got too warm. They're using it like a thermostat from 50 years ago. And that really drives home to me the example that, or the rule that the technology is actually the easy part. It's changing the human behavior around technology that is the hard part, because unless my family treats it as a Nest thermostat with all this automation and all these opportunities, it's just an expensive thermostat that's no better for economics or environment or climate or comfort than the thermostat I had in my house in the 1980s. So a lot of different moving parts there. And I think that's the other part of the equation, is that for purpose and prosperity, it's not just the technology. The technology is incredibly important, but we need the social scientists. We need the communicators. We need the community leaders. We need the writers and the speakers. We need all sorts of different people and all sorts of different skills, often at a very local level, literally everywhere in the world, to help create that change in behavior around the technology so that technology can do the work for the climate that it needs to do. And so I see tremendous opportunity there beyond kind of the usual suspects that we think of, the venture capitalists, the famous startup CEOs, the big corporations, the big governments. We literally all have a role to play in making this innovation real in our world. And of course, when we do that, there are great profits to be made. And I have no problem with that. I think if you've got a great product and you do really well with it, that is the best thing in the world, because first of all, you deserve it. Second of all, you're bringing other people along and maybe giving them the courage to push on their own products and become entrepreneurs or somehow become part of that innovation equation.
Thank you. Now, a lot of companies have a vested interest in being seen as green. Therefore, they do something called greenwashing, where they're kind of pretending to do certain things that kind of tick the box of, yes, I am green. So I do wonder, first, what are some small steps that any entrepreneur can do in order to make a difference to the climate in a way that they can fulfill their purpose and at the same time benefit financially from it? And secondly, in terms of companies that are greenwashing, what can they do differently so they can make a real difference and they're not just ticking a box?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start the answer with a word of caution, and that is that greenwashing has been around. The idea of greenwashing has been around since we started this green journey as a world. What's challenging about that is that the definition keeps expanding, and rightly so. That a really good climate or environmental solution, even 10, 15 years ago, is now seen as greenwashing. And I'll give you an example. When back around 2000, 2005, 2010, the world really started, or at least the developed world really started turning against coal as a fuel for power generation, and understandably so. At the time, natural gas was seen as the savior. Natural gas was going to save us because it seemed as though it was much lower greenhouse gases. It didn't have as many nasty chemicals thrown off when you burned it. What we're finding now is that natural gas is in the same category of bad guy as coal is, and within a very small number of years. So this is not something where we're seeing multiple decades between perception changes. We're seeing very, very, very small numbers of years between perception changes. And so when we look at greenwashing and any sort of investment in green technology or green policy, we have to look at what the definition is today, but we also have to take a very sober look over the next 10, 15, 30 years to see, okay, where might that definition be during the lifetime of my investment? Because very likely a lot of the things that we see as climate virtue today will be what I call climate theater or greenwashing very, very soon. And so, first of all, to be very aware of that, that definition is a dynamic one, and it's only getting tighter. The definition of virtue is only getting tighter. The second thing is to understand that really everything we do, everything we make has a climate component or an environmental component. And just to give you an example, an electric car, for example, has giant lithium-ion batteries in it. Lithium-ion batteries are wonderful in operation, but if you look at the front end, the mining, the extraction, the processing of those materials, it's really horrific. And then if you look at the back end, we're now figuring out how to recycle these things, but it's still environmentally challenged. And so when an entrepreneur or potential entrepreneur is looking at an opportunity, the world is looking a lot like those dynamic definitions. The world is looking at a full life cycle now, not just what's happening during the use of that product, but the whole life cycle of that product. The other side of that coin, though, is that everything is climate tech now. And so entrepreneurs who, even if they're working on something that doesn't seem to be climate tech, you don't have to think about it very hard, or at least in the way my crazy brain works, you don't have to think about it very hard to find the climate aspects of it. So how is it making the world more efficient, lower greenhouse gases, lower rare earth metals, for example, like the cobalt and the lithium and such that go into batteries? How is it making our world, for example, like the Zoom call that we're on right now, which would otherwise be probably an airplane flight for one or both of us, how is it making the world a more climate efficient and environmentally efficient and socially efficient sort of way? And I should pause there and say, I don't mean socially efficient in terms of some sort of repressive structure. I mean socially efficient in terms of, here we are connecting over thousands of miles in real time. We're exchanging ideas. We are inspiring each other. That, to me, is taking friction out of the innovation equation. And so that, to me, that innovation is what we need for climate. It's all about global solutions to global problems. So to me, there's a lot of opportunity there, but you have to take the lens, the traditional lens that you're looking at your product or service, and kind of shift over a little bit and see it through a climate lens, or what I call a climate plus lens. So climate plus pollution and endemic and everything else, so that you can see those advantages. And then that becomes a marketing advantage, because by and large, people are more inclined, it seems, to buy climate, environmentally, socially friendly products. But also you're seeing so many mandates now around the world, big and small, for companies to reduce their climate footprint, to mitigate the social justice aspects of what they're doing and report that and make it public. And then that drives, to one extent or another, drives their valuation, drives the profit for shareholders. So it really is a question of perhaps just looking at things through a slightly different lens. And with that slightly different lens, you can really start to tell a very true and very impactful and very different story and I think a very valuable story about whatever you're doing.
Thank you. So what can entrepreneurs do in order to do more for the climate so they can benefit and so they can also make a massive difference?
Well, I think there's so much work coming out of universities these days. There always is. But when it comes to climate, when it comes to engineering breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs, social science breakthroughs, software, of course, artificial intelligence now. And I'm probably a little bit biased given that I work at Stanford, but I'm seeing so much coming out of the academic side of the world that is in need of, call it entrepreneuring, if I can maybe that's a verb. I don't know, maybe I just made it up, but in need of entrepreneuring. And so I would really encourage potential entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are looking for their next thing, get engaged with higher education, get engaged with the incredible ideas and discoveries that are coming out of higher education, because by and large, the people who discover things are not the right people to develop and commercialize things. It's just a different mindset, different skill set. So there's a lot going on there. But I would also look to government. One of the things about climate tech in particular, going back to this very different underpinnings from, for example, digital innovation, is that government policy, whether it's a subsidy or a mandate or some version of that, is driving tremendous amounts of money towards specific outcomes. Maybe not specific tools to reach those outcomes, but specific outcomes. And that, I wish we didn't have to subsidize things, but we do. That is a gold mine, sometimes figuratively, but also often literally, a gold mine for entrepreneurs to identify opportunities and find funding for those opportunities and get those things done in a way that's beneficial both to the government who is subsidizing them, because they get that outcome, but the entrepreneur can also see a really favorable outcome too. So a lot going on in that respect, I think, both in just higher education, research universities, and government being just two examples.
Thank you. Now, can you give us some specific steps? So, for example, you mentioned Nest, which is basically like a thermostat. And what's really cool about the thermostat is that it allows you to connect your phone, I think, to this thermostat so that you can, even if you're at a distance, you can switch off your heater. Am I right in saying that? And then that's one way that you can control the heating in your home and therefore reduce climate impact. Another thing that I think some government initiatives did was that they were offering, for example, funding for insulation or for changing your windows to double glazed. Are there any particular things that are very, very specific, something really practical, something really small that you believe if, let's say, 10,000 people did that, 10,000 entrepreneurs did, I don't know, these 3 to 5 small steps, we could all make a massive difference together? Could you tell us some of those little steps that you believe could make a difference?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. One is to walk the walk, so to speak, in your personal life, whether it is recycling and composting. It's at least in the Western world, we seem to idolize entrepreneurs, and which is okay because they need all the support that they can get. I've been down that road. It's a very difficult road, but we really look to them as exemplars of what we want to be and how we want to see the world be innovative and prosperous. So simply doing the right thing day in, day out can often have an outsized effect. But I think beyond the behavior, I would say, look at energy consumption. everything that we do involves energy. That's the nature. That's how the universe works. And the more energy efficient that a device or a service can be, the better it's going to be for the user and economically and for the planet, climate-wise. Green software is a great example of this, the green software movement, where software is now being consciously designed to minimize its processing footprint and therefore its energy footprint. And whatever can be done to reduce the need for, say, one more data center, they're now going up like hotcakes. But anything we can do to bring energy out of the equation and make things more energy efficient. Same thing with water. We use an extraordinary amount of water in this world, a lot of it very inefficiently. And so anything we can do to take water out of a system, take water out of an innovation, and by take water out, I mean reducing it. You can never remove it entirely, but be as water efficient as possible. And then the other part of it is, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here going forward, is those rare earth metals. To come back to that for an example. All the innovation happening now about getting away from the need for so much cobalt, getting away from the need for so much lithium, getting away from the need for so many chemicals that are either really environmentally climate negative to produce, to process, to manufacture with, and or don't have a recycling path that is effective yet. There's so much going on there. Think of it as materials efficiency or rare materials efficiency. And then finally, recycling. We actually have one of the most advanced recycling companies in the world, Redwood Materials, which is just a few miles from here. And they're doing incredible things in lithium-ion battery recycling. And recycling, you say you love doing it. I get a kick out of it too. But it's not sexy. It's not glamorous. And so it's very difficult, to say, go to a high school kid or a kid in university and say, you want to be in the recycling business. You're going to make a lot of money and it's going to be really cool. And they're like, gosh, trash? I don't know. But that's where so much opportunity is, because as we take our economies increasingly from linear extractive economies to circular economies, non-extractive economies, recycling economies, then the opportunity for that work in and of itself, but also the opportunity to take whatever we're innovating and make sure it's recyclable, make sure that the life cycle of that product is a circle and not a line, that's a tremendous opportunity. So between personal behavior, energy, water, waste and recycling, and there's so many ways, in big ways and small, to do these little things that can improve our world.
Thank you. I'm really keen on sustainability, but I find the thing that trips people up is that the government doesn't make that so easy. For example, in London, where I live, depending on the borough where you live, the area, they have different conditions in terms of recycling. So let's say in certain neighborhoods, perhaps they collect the recycling once a week and it's all mixed up. In others, it's all separate and so on. So it makes it like something that's not so easy to do. It's not like so straightforward. So I wonder, what do you suggest for people to do to make sure that there are certain things that are easy for them? Or is there anything entrepreneurs can do to make it easy for themselves to recycle or to save energy or to do, I don't know, something little that will make over long term a massive difference?
Yeah, I think it starts with advocacy. I think, having worked in city government in the past, I can tell you that the feedback that the city staff, for example, receives from the citizens can be incredibly insightful and valuable. If recycling isn't easy or it needs to be easier than it is, advocacy at the very local level can be incredibly helpful in helping set policy priorities and helping city staff, who are often very much overworked, to see opportunities or see new technologies, for example, that they wouldn't otherwise have had time to be exposed to, or the mental bandwidth to be exposed to. So I think there's a huge advocacy piece there. The other part is really education and taking a deep dive into that topic, both with the aim of saying, okay, what's best in class? Who's figured this out, or at least figured it out as best as possible, or who's got the best solutions right now? How can we adapt those in where we live, where we need to be? But then, of course, because I've always got that entrepreneur side of my brain, are there opportunities there? Are there technologies or business models that are proving to be quite effective, but perhaps aren't being entrepreneured? I'll use that verb again. That aren't being entrepreneured effectively. And so are there advocacy opportunities in terms of changing what's going on locally? Are there education opportunities in terms of changing what's going on locally? But then are there also entrepreneurial or business opportunities associated with taking something that is really good, but otherwise unnoticed or really small, and making it big and both super profitable and super effective?
Thank you. What's your message for entrepreneurs worldwide related to climate?
Oh my, I would say get started. There is no time like the present. And you will never be in a situation where you have all the answers. It's a little bit like having kids. You'll never be completely ready to have children. You just have to, when you're otherwise ready, you just have to jump in and do it. And I think it's the same thing with entrepreneurs. But also find something you're passionate about. And that doesn't have to be something you've been passionate about since you were a kid. Otherwise we'd all want to own sports teams, but, or in my case, be a professional bike racer, neither of which are possible. But find something you're passionate about, or you can see yourself becoming passionate about, because in my experience, there's no worse thing than getting up every morning and working on something that you're not passionate about. That's where I would start. I would also encourage, beginning entrepreneurs to seek out advice, talk to everybody that you possibly can about what you're doing. There's an old saying, at least here in Silicon Valley, that if you ask for money, you'll get advice. But if you ask for advice, you'll get money. I don't know if that works the same way at the rest of the world, but talk to as many people as you can. The minute you start acting on convictions that haven't been tested with smart people that you trust, smart, experienced people that you trust, you're going down a very, very dangerous road. So seek the feedback. The entrepreneurial community, especially here in Silicon Valley, is incredibly collaborative. Everyone will have a cup of coffee with everyone else and talk about ideas. So really seek out, use your own fire, your own enthusiasm, but also seek out people who might have been there and done that, for example, in the field that you're in, or even a different field where there might be lessons that you can apply to what you're doing. So it's a big and scary step, but if you have the mindset for it, if you have the personality for it, and you do it diligently, and that includes going out and literally talking to everyone you know and everyone that they will introduce you to, it is a very rewarding way to make a living.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential, so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.